This is the Farm Monitor. For over 50 years, your source for agribusiness news and features from around the Southeast and across the country, focusing on one of the nation's top industries, agriculture. The Farm Monitor is produced by one of the largest general farm organizations, the Georgia Farm Bureau. Now here are your hosts, Ray DeLessio and Kenny Bergamy.
Well, actually, Kenny B is off this week for some well-deserved R&R. Instead, it's just me flying solo for the next 30 minutes. So without further delay, let's go ahead and show you that lineup. It's not the first crop that comes to mind when you think of Georgia, especially since it comes from the same county as the famous Vidalia onion. But it's unique, and the farmer we spoke to says it's fun to grow. Also on the program, a new campaign designed to help farmers recoup some of their losses from the COVID-19 pandemic, and why Commissioner Gary Black says don't be so quick to blame a limited food supply. Plus,
well, hey everybody, Ranger Nick coming up. If you're spending some more time outside this summer and thinking about maybe building a tree house or your own deer stand in a tree, you're going to want to stick around. I'm going to talk about things you can examine about the site and the tree, including how compacted that soil might be. That and so much more starts right now on the Farm Monitor.
While Tattnall County is best known for the world-famous Vidalia onion, one farmer in that area has become a go-to producer for a different specialty crop. Damon Jones investigated and found himself in quite a pickle.
This is the scene on most of the farms around southeast Georgia as harvest for Vidalia onions is heading down the home stretch. However, things are just starting to ramp up for Herschel Durrance at his operation, where the pickle crop is ready to come out of the field. It's a unique product that he's now been growing for several years and has a serious passion for.
It's by far my favorite thing to grow, pack. We do about 50 to 60,000 bushels in the spring, and then another 60 to 70,000 bushels in the fall.
Unlike the cucumbers you might see in grocery stores or at farmers markets, this product is smaller and specifically designed to become that salty, tangy accompaniment to your burger or sandwich.
It's a different variety. This is a pickling cucumber, and that's a slicer. Grown basically the same way, it's just different sizes and different varieties.
Speaking of growing, it was a very challenging season as inconsistent weather left plenty of questions about this year's crop. And while harvesting might have gotten off to a slow start, optimism is building with each picking.
This year's growing season has been probably the most difficult. Between the wind, the rain, and the cold snaps, we've had a very trying time. We're in the beginning of the harvest season and it is beginning to pick up. The first picking was a disaster. This one has really turned around and it looks like the third picking will be even higher.
Once the pickles are out of the field, things move very quickly as the fresher they are put into the brine, the better the finished product will be. That's the reason Durrance places an emphasis on such a fast turnaround.
That is the most important thing in pickles, the freshness of them. We very rarely will pick and not ship the same day. Obviously, if you have a piece of load, you'll carry it over or something, but I would say 90 to 95% of our stuff is shipped in the first day.
Now, even though it is a specialty item, this crop hasn't completely escaped the effects of COVID-19, as most of the supply goes to businesses that have been most impacted by the pandemic.
They go in restaurants, most of them. You slice into sandwich shops. Very few do we ship into jars, into your Mount Olive, Clausen, Vlasic. We don't ship a lot to them. That's more of your machine harvest companies ship to them. Most of them go into 5-gallon bucket pails and go directly to restaurants. It's actually a very quick process, most of it. My pickles harvested today, within 2 weeks they could be in restaurants.
Reporting from Tattnall County, I'm Damon Jones for the Farm Monitor.
Well, thanks to COVID-19, empty shelves and refrigerators have many consumers asking, where's the beef? It also has producers asking, where's the beef prices? In fact, the price gap between wholesale meats and livestock continues to increase as animal processing capacity slows. American Farm Bureau's Michael Clements explains.
The global COVID-19 pandemic has injected never-before-seen uncertainty into the animal protein markets. Producers face depressed livestock prices as processing capacity declines, but prices at the meat counter are increasing, widening the gap between the two, according to the American Farm Bureau Federation. AFBF economist Michael Neveu says labor struggles at meat processing facilities are limiting the number of animals being processed.
One thing that creates is almost an immediate oversupply of animals trying to come to market at this point. So you've seen dramatic declines in fed cattle futures as well as lean hog futures. At the same time, since there's been a reduction in processing capacity, you've also seen the wholesale prices of beef and pork pretty much skyrocket.
Neveu says more than 24 processing plants implemented closures of various lengths because of COVID-19, and facilities are slowing processing speeds to ensure worker safety.
If you look at cattle and hog slaughter, you can kind of use those as a proxy for how much actual decline in capacity we've seen. And from its March highs, we've seen weekly cattle slaughter drop almost 40% and weekly hog slaughter drop 45%.
The gap in wholesale meat prices and livestock prices prompted President Donald Trump to ask the Department of Justice to investigate.
President Trump announced that he had asked DOJ to look into price fixing or any potential manipulation by the processing facilities. Basically, what he was looking at is that spread between the wholesale price of beef and pork and the prices that producers are receiving.
Michael Clements, Washington.
Yeah, and 2 months into this COVID-19 pandemic, it doesn't take an expert to see what kind of an impact the virus has had on agriculture in general. Georgia farmers, no exception. They're feeling the pinch as well. So in order to offset some of their losses, the Georgia Department of Agriculture is leading the charge with a new campaign through their Georgia Grown program. John Holcomb tells us all about it.
Now more than ever, buy Georgia Grown. That is the message the Georgia Department of Agriculture is wanting people to hear, and of course, what they want people to do in their latest marketing campaign. In the past couple of months, agriculture has taken a significant hit from COVID-19, which means farmers and producers all over Georgia have taken a hit as well, which has prompted a response from ag leaders in the state.
The options are fewer for people, and that they're really getting cramped, and it's wearing on people's faces, wearing on their tone of voice, and that's why we're trying to do everything possible we can through the brand and try to let's see if we can address this marketing season.
The main thing the campaign is wanting people to know is that there isn't a supply problem. The supply is very much there. It's just there's been some disruptions in the supply chain, and products just can't get into the stores fast enough.
It is a critical, absolutely critical that we communicate. There's not a supply problem. There isn't. There's been some interruptions, been some speed bumps along the way, and when you have to take 50% of your supply, which 50% of them was for institutional use, and now we have to get that directly because we're all at home now, and so we're buying from the retail. It stands to reason that pipe's not big enough for everything to get through.
After noticing these things, the Department of Ag, Georgia Farm Bureau, UGA Extension, and the Georgia Fruit and Vegetable Association partner together to help farmers, something that is much needed after years of challenges and this newest challenge that no one has ever experienced before.
Our agents and specialists are seeing firsthand the problems that the producers across the state are facing, not just because of the regular problems they face with pests, disease, weather, immigration, labor, all of those other things, coupled with low prices, but to top that off with the issues brought on by COVID-19, really does put a lot of our producers at the breaking point. So we wanted to do anything we could to be able to assist and help.
The campaign consists of PSAs, commercials, recipes, and more that is all supported and driven by social media and is depending on people to do their part to help share and bring awareness to the campaign and to ultimately help Georgia farmers and agriculture.
So this is a partnership. We've got to do this together. Now more than ever, buy Georgia Grown, because those dollars stay here, and plus, I would still argue you're getting a better product, you're getting a more efficient and a more wholesome product because it's fresher.
To do your part, make sure to follow Georgia Grown on Facebook. On there you can find posts to share and a frame to use as your profile picture. And make sure to use the hashtags now more than ever and Buy Georgia Grown. Reporting in Jackson County for the Farm Monitor, I'm John Holcomb.
Well, hey everybody, Ranger Nick coming up. We're on the campus of UGA assessing trees and determining if this one is good enough to build a tree house in. Coming up after the break.
Hi, I'm John Jensen with Georgia DNR Wildlife Conservation Section, and we're here today at the Amphibian Foundation in Atlanta to talk about Argentine black and white tegus. Argentine black and white tegus are a large lizard not native to the United States. It has become established as an exotic invasive species in several sites in South Florida, and we now believe in the Toombs and Tattnall County area of Georgia. We're trying to remove them from the wild because they can have negative impacts on our native species. They eat just about anything they want, plant and animal matter, and one of their favorite foods are eggs from ground nesting animals such as gopher tortoises, our protected state reptile, birds including turkeys and quail. They're also a burrowing species. They'll make their own burrows, but they'll also use the burrows made by other animals, including our native gopher tortoise, and they may displace gopher tortoises in doing so. So we really encourage the general public to report sightings of this animal. That allows us to determine where to focus our trapping efforts in an effort to eradicate this species. Additionally, if you're able to safely and humanely dispatch of the animal, we encourage that and we want that information too. Argentine black and white tegus are in general kind of black and white and banded. They can get up to 4.5 feet long. Many of the public that encounter these often report them thinking that they look like a baby alligator well away from the water. These are very common in the pet trade, but we ask folks that keep these as pets to be responsible, and if you've come to a point where you no longer want this animal, there are reptile adoption groups that may take it and try to find a home. Releasing it into the wild is the absolute worst thing to do. It will affect our native species, and we can't have that.
No, we cannot. In fact, Ranger Nick and I did an episode on the tegus last year in South Georgia. Now, speaking of Nick, it's something him and I have argued about for years. That age-old debate, if a tree falls in the woods and nobody's around, doesn't make a sound. Nick says yes, I say it depends. Then again, neither of us are tree experts, but we did spend time with one recently and learned how to tell if a tree is healthy and the best ways to install a tree fort or even a deer stand.
Well, here we are here on the campus of the University of Georgia, a pretty quiet place. I'm practicing social distancing until we're given the all clear to get a little bit closer. I'm joined this month by Dr. Jason Gordon. He's Assistant Professor of Community Forestry in the Warnell School of Forestry and Natural Resources. And Doc, if I was to look at a tree like this and consider to myself if I wanted to build my own deer stand for later in the fall, or put a tree house in a tree like this, which would be cool. We're at the visitor center. Dr. Gordon, what are some of the things I might want to consider about the site before I build something like this?
Well, Nick, there's a lot of different things you have to consider, but three primary things that I want to point out, and we're speaking generally here,
okay,
and from any kind of context. But number one is you got to look for a target. And here we have two important targets at least. We have the building there and you're thinking about if this tree could fall, and this is a fairly old tree, or a part of the tree could fail and fall onto that building and cause damage. The second target is here in the parking area.
Oh yeah.
And cars park here, and you got to think about the frequency of whether people use the target or how that target is inhabited. So you got to think about the target. That's very important. The second important thing to think about is the history of the site. And has that site had some kind of construction in the past? How is the drainage of the site? All of these kinds of things can affect the structural integrity of the tree. And the third thing you got to think about is the weather. And what we're talking about here is not weather like today, a beautiful day. We're talking about weather in kind of extreme conditions, a storm with strong winds or an ice storm of some sort, that's when you're going to probably see the failure of the tree happen.
And what great things to think about. And we're going to talk next about specifics with this tree and things to look for. But the site where we are, I've thought about building a tree house near maybe the driveway and how much of a problem that could be. So let's talk next about some specifics with the tree and some things that you might look for as a professional before we think about building. So let's go there next. Okay, so from the site evaluation side, Jason, now we're walking up to this beautiful water oak here on campus. Walk me through, what are some things you're looking at in this specimen before we're going to decide about putting a tree forward or a deer stand?
Well, that's a very good question, Nick. So first, the thing you got to think about is the species of the tree. It's very important to consider the species because different species are stronger than other species. A water oak, for example, is a fairly weak species. And if you know what a water oak is, you've seen one in your yard, it always has a bunch of junk, little twigs and things falling from it all the time.
Okay.
So it's a fairly weak tree. You got to think about that. The second thing, we always start from we always look at the crown, the stem, and the roots of the tree. You got to look at all three pieces of the tree when you're thinking about the integrity of that tree.
Okay.
So in the crown here, one thing we might look at, for example, is how the limbs are attached to the stem or attached to each other. We want strong attachments. And sometimes when these limbs are weakly attached, they haven't grown together correctly. And there's basically nothing connecting them to each other. And when the wind blows, there's torsion like this. The tree moves and it can just split those limbs off.
Interesting. Okay.
Another thing to look for if we move down the stem of the tree is for codominant stems. And it's very common for trees to have, particularly certain species like Bradford pears, to have codominant stems. Not that you build in the Bradford pear,
Right.
but a lot of other trees have that as well. Codominant stems are where two more or less equal weighted stems grow up like a V.
Okay.
And that's very important. They come together as a V. And again, that's a weak attachment, or can be a weak attachment. And when the tree twists in that kind of extreme weather, in that storm, it just kind of rips apart.
I gotcha.
And so that's why you see so much failure in that way. So then the third place we look, and you can never forget about this, it's so important, are the roots. And as part of the roots, we have a very critical area called the root plate. And that's this area basically where this pine straw is at.
Okay.
And that is the perhaps the most important part of this tree from a structural standpoint. And so we have to consider what kind of condition the roots are in the root plate. Are they starting to rot? Is there a fungus in there? And a number of other things having to do with the soil.
Now I got to ask this, just as a tree lover, nailing into this tree, when you talked about the stem, folks at home that might be worried about doing that and hurting the tree, talk to us about that. How do we avoid that?
Well, you can install hardware into a tree, and again, it depends on the species. Some species do better with it than other species.
Okay.
But you can certainly put hardware into a tree without incurring too much risk in terms of how that tree will respond from a health standpoint. However, if the more hardware you put into it, the higher risk is incurred.
Yeah.
What you really want to do ideally is to build around the tree. A lot of tree stands, for example, do not install anything into the tree. That's what you want to do preferably.
So a beautiful water oak on solid ground here at the UGA Visitor Center. We brought Jason back in. Jason, as you look at this tree and everything we've talked about today, what's your overall assessment of this guy?
This is a healthy tree.
Good.
Very healthy water oak. They've done a great job with it. They have certified arborists working on this campus, and I just can't say enough about the good job that they do with the trees on this campus.
Well,
so very safe.
That's incredible, and we're fortunate for that at UGA. But if someone at home doesn't have an arborist, doesn't have a professional that can do these kinds of things, what could we do at home to assess and mitigate some of this?
Well, Nick, the first thing they got to think about is and they probably, in some cases, they'll have to contact a professional, but in general, pruning the crown, taking out the dead wood, taking out weakly connected branches like I talked about earlier, making the tree happy, babying the tree, make sure it has mulch and things like that is all good. The other thing really important is to continue monitoring this tree. It's a living organism, so you have to keep an eye on it. You can't just forget about it, because even after you build the tree house, you got to make sure that that tree stays healthy.
That's right.
And then the third thing, and you have to bring in a professional for this, but if there is compaction in the soil,
Yep.
on a very special tree like this tree, not all trees, but a very special tree, an arborist can actually come in and aerate the ground, and there's certain techniques for that, and to kind of allow improve the soil conditions around that tree.
Jason, thanks so much for spending time with me today. I hope you all have enjoyed this one. You all know what to do. When you're online checking out the YouTube videos of our past Ranger Nick episodes, hop on over to the Farm Monitor Facebook page and check out what's going on there. And until next time, as we always say, Jason, for the Farm Monitor, I'm Ranger Nick, reminding you that enthusiasm is contagious, so pass it on. Y'all, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you right back here again next month. See ya.
Great job, Nick. Thanks so much. Well, 40 years later, a once charred and decimated forest is now showing signs of new life. After the break, what Mount St. Helens has taught us from a biological point of view. Well, finally this week, it was 40 years ago this month, May 18th, 1980 to be exact, that Mount St. Helens erupted and dramatically changed the surrounding landscape. Once lush green forests incinerated, even washed away by the flooding from the melted ice caps. Animals and vegetation gone forever. Or maybe not. In the decades since the eruption, scientists from the USDA Forest Service had studied ecological recovery at the volcano. And what they discovered is, pun intended, groundbreaking.
I was in a helicopter flying out from the green forest some 30 miles away. And it was this verdant evergreen forest that the Northwest is so well known for. And then suddenly this stark contrast, as far as I could see, just barren gray landscape with trees leveled and the ground smoldering. It was beyond anything I thought a volcanic eruption could do because it was so vast, it seemed so complete in its destruction. And it was profound, and it is to this day, some nearly 40 years later. When we landed the helicopter and I got out, and the first thing I started noticing that although the landscape looked bleak and desolate, there was life there. I looked under a blown down log and I saw vegetative sprigs starting to come up green. I saw the workings of the carpenter ants, the sawdust-like frass we call it, at the base of those logs. Then I looked over on the hillside and I saw dark soil, and I walked up and saw that it was the turning of the northern pocket gopher, bringing the nutrient-rich soil to the surface, creating a little island of fertility in this otherwise impoverished landscape. And then when we went over to an adjacent wetland, I saw there were amphibians there, even fish were rising, insects. And so the big epiphany of the time was that although it appeared that vast destruction had occurred, and indeed it had, most of the organisms perished, but some individuals of all species survived somewhere in some way. And so based on that realization that biological legacies persist, some components of the pre-eruption, pre-disturbance ecological communities survive these types of intense events, has created a new foundation in our field called the role of biological legacies. And now our general expectation should be that one, life is tenacious, life will persist, not the opposite of that.
40 years, remember it like it was yesterday. Well, unfortunately, that is going to do it for this week's edition of the Farm Monitor. A friendly reminder, though, that for all the latest ag info regarding food, great recipes, and what's happening down on the farm, be sure to check out our Twitter, Facebook, and Pinterest pages. You'll stay informed and you'll see what's up in the world of farming and with us at the show. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next week right here on the Farm Monitor. Be safe.